went through a very huge transition from the tech world to the impact world, and I was trying to get to know companies that had a business model, but that also were doing good and that were addressing a real problem, that were addressing, how I called it, one of the 17 UN Sustainable and Development Goals. And I just couldn't find a source that specifically targeted this niche. I guess it became my mission to educate talent on this concept of social entrepreneurship, with the hypothesis that if they could maintain their financial security, they would be happier, more engaged, and just more satisfied by working for a company that addressed a real need and which shared their own values.
Do you feel like capitalism can be reinvented from the inside?
It can be reinvented, but we need better leaders.
What if your job could have real purpose? Claudia is the founder of Reinventing Capitalism, the podcast that amplifies visionary entrepreneurs who prove that profit and purpose can thrive together. She's a former tech exec turned impact entrepreneur, whose mission is to inspire talent to build careers that serve people, planet, and profit. Reinventing Capitalism has spotlighted leaders behind companies like Aura, Notpla, The Light Phone, and Olio, as well as from Too Good To Go, Beyond Meat, and Allbirds. The only way to reinvent capitalism is to reinvent it together. Welcome to Reinventing Capitalism, the podcast where I, Claudia Tomas, decode the success of for-profit impact businesses through the stories of their founders. Our goal is to inspire you towards a purpose-driven career, because life's too short for boring jobs and soul-crushing corporations. Quick note before we get back to the episode. Just give me 30 seconds of your time. Two things. The first is a huge thank you for listening and tuning into the show week after week. It means the world to me. And the second is that we are just getting started. If you enjoy what we do here, please join the 14% of people that listen to this podcast regularly and follow us on this app. I promise to do everything in my power to make this show as good as I can, now and into the future. Thank you.
All right, Claudia. This is going to be great. I think normally you're sitting in my seat asking the questions.
That's correct.
How does it feel being on the other side? Are you a little bit nervous?
Nervous, maybe it's not the word, but it does feel different.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I guess it had to come a day where I was on the other side of the mic, so there we go.
Great. Let's do this. All right, let's start from the top. Tell me about how Reinventing Capitalism came about. Where did the idea come from? Just kind of walk me through the beginning of the process.
Sure. So the idea came about almost a year ago. It was last August. It really came from a personal need. I went through a very huge transition from the tech world to the impact world. And I was trying to get to know companies that had a business model, but that also were doing good and that were addressing a real problem, that were addressing, how I called it, one of the 17 UN Sustainable and Development Goals. And I just couldn't find a source that specifically targeted this niche. And so when I started my master's, I was like, I want to do something on the side, and I thought this could be a very nice project to do. Also because when I told people that I was going to start to study that master's, no one knew about the concept of social entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. It also showed like my own needs, right? I didn't know it until I actually decided to make the switch. And also a lot of people actually like me. I realized that we're just working for companies that paid the bills, or that could give them the financial security that they needed or were looking for. And so these two things were kind of like, okay, it feels like there's a need here. It feels like there's a space that really needs to be addressed. So I guess it became my mission to educate talent on this concept of social entrepreneurship, with the hypothesis that if they could maintain their financial security, they would be happier, more engaged, and just more satisfied by working for a company that addressed a real need and which shared their own values.
That makes a lot of sense. You know, as you mentioned at the time, you were working in tech and having some success there. I think stepping away from that world isn't always easy. Can you kind of walk us through the decision there and that process?
Yeah, sure. I graduated from university in London. I had always worked in high growth tech companies, but somehow I always knew that that wasn't what I would end up doing, because I always chose the companies that I was going to work for, either because it paid well or because of my manager or because of the potential career growth, but it was never because of what the company actually did. My latest job experience, it's the clear example of that, because I was working for a crypto company. It was a company that did finance for crypto. And I was hired to build their partnerships department. So I was hired for my skill set, but I had no idea about crypto at all. And so I learned a lot. I was working with very, very smart people. I did a lot of new things. But for example, like 80% of the company were engineers. So it was very hard for me to get around. And I essentially was about to get a burnout. I was working very long hours on something that I didn't fully understand, and I just had the feeling that I would never shine at that company. And so there I started a period of introspection and trying to understand what I really wanted to do. And I realized that I was, I'm very sensitive. I love helping other people. And I just wanted to make sure that my next career move was something that I really cared about and that was closer to my values. And so actually I believe in serendipity. I believe that things happen for a reason. And very randomly, one night in London, I was invited to this dinner and I was sitting next to this girl that I didn't really know. And I told her about like this transition process. And she said, you should look up the master's that I just finished, actually. It's called Social Innovation and Entrepreneurship. It's literally the intersection between business and impact. So exactly what you've described. Yep. And yeah, like she just said that it changed her life. So I was like, okay, maybe I should actually look into it. And I loved it because she put into words things that I didn't really know. Like, I didn't know the concept of social entrepreneurship myself. So yeah, she really I think I should tell her one day, but like she
Hopefully she's listening.
Hopefully she's listening. She doesn't really know that she actually also changed the direction of my career. But yeah, like just after that, I researched the masters. It was one of the top masters in the space, and I decided to apply. That's what really led me to the space.
And so if you had to narrow it down to kind of one precise moment, it was that kind of serendipitous meeting at dinner with a friend?
I think so. Okay. I think so. And then I applied to the executive program because at the time I was working for Ash, for my manager, who was a great guy, very team oriented. He was coaching me a lot. I was learning a lot from him. And it's not that I didn't want to leave the company. I didn't want to leave him. Yeah. But after all, I was like, look, this guy can leave the company tomorrow. I shouldn't make my decision based on this one person. And also I thought that if I stayed while I was studying my master's, I would disappoint him because I would never give my 100%. But I just decided to keep the executive program instead of going to the whole thing, to the like week on week full year program. And actually that's what has allowed me to grow this project.
Because the executive program is kind of intensive weeks spread out throughout the year? Okay.
Exactly. I had to be in London 2 weeks every 2 months.
Gotcha. Shout out to Ash. I think it's a sign of the power of good management. If someone who you respect is enough to keep you at a company. All right, so we talked about your time in tech, and then you're getting into this world. And then you decide, okay, I'm going to start a podcast.
Correct.
Which is something you had never done before.
No.
I imagine there were times in your first year when you're like, okay, what am I doing here? Can you tell us a little bit about the kind of the fears that you're overcoming in this first year of starting basically a business in a form factor that you hadn't worked in before?
I think there were definitely a lot of fears. It was the first time that I was putting myself out there, creating content, giving my opinion on things. And I think for sure I was scared at some point of what people would think and about the scrutiny that you put yourself into when you post things online, because they can get viral and suddenly everyone in the world can have an opinion. I'm not saying that everyone in the world listens to the podcast yet. But I always use this framework, which is what is the upside and what's the worst case scenario. the upside was huge. If it worked, I could, like build on my personal branding. I could get to know amazing founders. I could, like have a message that I was really proud of sharing. And the worst case scenario was that no one would listen to it.
Yeah.
At least I would have tried. So I think, like putting these kind of like framework on paper really helped to understand that I had a huge opportunity in front of me.
So to overcome this fear, it's kind of just thinking about the best upside and the worst downside, and realizing that the worst downside is not really that bad.
Exactly.
And so you've really immersed yourself in this world of impact, first through your studies and now through these interviews you're doing with leaders in the space. Do you fear yourself changing at all? Are you picking up new values? Kind of tell us a little bit about the influence it's had on you as a person.
For sure. I do feel like I've changed a lot in this past year. I think one thing that it's growing on me, it's empathy. Hearing all these stories of people wanting to do good really makes you realize that you come from a very privileged background, and that I should be very grateful for everything, for all the abundance that I've had in my life. There was this one interview to Aileen. She's the founder of Made for a Woman. She's from Madagascar. She essentially wanted to improve the livelihood of artisans in Madagascar, which, by the way, it's the poorest, one of the poorest countries in the world. And she's partnered up with luxury brands to produce their bags, clothes, etc. in Madagascar. And she's created this whole network of artisans, and she pays them more than the minimum wage. She gives them access to healthcare, therapy. She covers like costs for the artisans' families. Like, she's really trying to, like help these people that actually have nothing. And that definitely like made me be more empathetic with everyone around me. Again, gratitude as well. I think seeing or hearing all these stories makes me be very grateful about the opportunities that I've had in my life. I guess I'm also more authentic, like the fact that suddenly, like I'm not scared of what people think, and I'm just here, like sharing my story and like posting all these things on social media. I think you really have to unlayer yourself up. I don't know if that word even exists.
Fine, that'll work.
And yeah, so authenticity is another one.
Okay, like peeling off a layer and showing your true self.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so empathy, gratitude, and authenticity.
Yeah.
Very nice. Let's talk a little bit more about the podcast as a form factor. You could have started a blog, but you started a podcast. And so why interviews? Kind of what made you pick this format?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned it briefly, but I thought that it was a very digestible format.
Yeah.
For, like I envisioned talented people, busy people that, like maybe had like 30 minutes to spare in their days. And I thought it was a very digestible format to listen, like anytime, in the car, commuting, showering, I don't know, like you
think
you
people
name
listen
it.
to your podcast in the shower?
Could be. And but the most important reason was that it gave me an opportunity to meet people. So I was aware that I was getting into an industry where I had zero connections. Yeah. So it was a good opportunity to meet founders, and it was a great opportunity to just build my personal brand. I think I also thought about the blog, but when you write a blog, you're more limited to what you write. Yeah. Whereas with the podcast, I can actually share my thoughts. People can see how I express myself, how I interact with people, and I think that generates a lot of engagement with your audience.
Okay. And so after someone listens to one of your podcasts, whether in the shower or not, what do you hope that they feel? Like, what's the lasting impact that you want it to have?
I want them to feel hopeful and inspired. I want them to know that society is changing. I want them to learn about companies that are really doing good, and I want them to feel hopeful that there's a chance that they can work for a company or invest their day-to-day in a project that they actually care about. I feel that because of capitalism and the fact that we've attached like human value to productivity, we work as machines. A lot of us, we work as machines. I used to work as a machine. So I think, making people feel hopeful about the fact that there's another way, that's, only if I can leave them with that thought, I've already achieved my objective.
Okay. Very nice. Let's talk a little bit more about the topics and the people that you're covering in your podcast. You're only interviewing leaders and the leadership of impact companies. Can you define what an impact company is?
For sure. I will preface this by saying that there are a lot of definitions of what an impact company is. In general, this space has been overcrowded. So there's a lot of definitions about sustainability, about circularity, etc., etc. So all these words mean 100 different things to 100 different people. But the standard definition is a company that is addressing a social or environmental problem with a business model. So these companies are essentially selling the product or service that they market.
Okay. And you know, there are a lot of options out there. Kind of, how do you choose whose stories you're amplifying, which ones you're not picking up? Walk us through that process.
I do a lot of research. I spend a lot of time researching companies within this space. I really like the main variable needs to be that these companies are addressing one of the 17 UN SDGs.
Okay.
And then like it's just like my personal opinion really, like I just research them. I make sure that they're actually legit with the claims that they put forward. And I try to choose a mix between companies that are maybe B2C that my audience can know, so that the content is more shareable, people can relate to these companies, with maybe lesser known or smaller companies that I think that have a lot of potential growth.
Okay. So a lot of it's really what you're pulled to.
Yeah. They definitely need to meet the definition of impact.
Yeah.
But yeah, like after all, it's my own it's my own opinion.
You've been interviewing across a very wide range of this whole impact space can be both environmental impact or social impact, and so this might be a hard question to answer, but kind of what's the most interesting thing you've learned so far in all these interviews?
Okay, so I think I could mention like all the cool products or services that the companies I've interviewed are marketing. I could talk about how a company is using AI to prevent coastal erosion, or how another company is using seaweed to make packaging. But I think like the insight that has most opened my mind is the fact that we've lost the value of ethics in our society and in how we do business. I feel that business right now, businesses are not necessarily adding value, which is the ultimate goal of what a business does, right? To improve people's lives and add value to our lives. And I think that companies end up doing things because it's the law, because they can do it. But what about whether if it's the right thing to do or not? So I think what I've realized is this, that like leaders outside this impact space that maybe are more elevated or more conscious about the negative externalities of their companies, like just don't really care. Like I guess out of sight, out of mind, but you don't really care about the impact that your products or services have in the world or in other people if you cannot see it. So yeah, I think that's my biggest takeaway, that I think as a society we all need to elevate ourselves and be a bit more empathetic and try to be more aware of the impacts or externalities, however you want to call it, that our actions have.
Hi, can I ask you a quick favor? Every week, we dive into the stories of founders that do more than just make money. Our mission is to prove that a career in impact can be both purposeful and financially sustainable. If you believe in creating meaningful work, share today's episode with one friend who's ready to make a difference. It would mean a great deal to me. Your support is what keeps this show alive and growing. Thank you.
It kind of leads us to a more theoretical part of this conversation, which is, do you feel like capitalism can be reinvented from the inside?
I think so. I think, it exactly ties to the previous question. I think it can be reinvented, but we need better leaders. I think these leaders need to move away from the Friedman way of thinking, which is a firm or a company is here to maximize its profits. And we need to move away from that and understand that yes, a company like the ultimate goal is to make profit, but at the cost of what? And I think profit needs to come as a consequence of actually adding value to people or to the society. And so if we change that paradigm and we change this short-termism mentality, I do think that leaders can start making decisions based on what's right versus how can we make more money. So everything comes from the top. And it's not only leaders in business. It can be leaders in politics, it can be leaders in organizations, it can be mentors. I think like this way of thinking just needs to spread, but it needs to come from someone that is in a position of power.
Okay, and so there's often this idea of you either do good or you make money, but you're saying ultimately we should be trying to do both?
Yes, I think you can definitely have both, and this podcast proves it. I only interview companies that are addressing a real need, but with a business model. But if I have to say something that needs to change, I think, is this short-termism from venture capitals or like these big investors. Because I think we still have this short-termism mentality from investors where they want to see their profits ASAP and they want to make sure that their investment, they want to know as quickly as possible which is the ROI of their investment. And that also needs to change. Like investors are also like these leaders that need to change their ethics or their way of thinking. And if something needs to change in order to achieve both, I think it's the time that we need to wait in order to see the return on our investment.
Like the patience levels.
Yeah.
So you're talking about investors and funding. I think you've said in the past that impact needs capital to scale.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Yeah, I think that historically, all these social and environmental problems have been addressed by foundations or NGOs. And we all know that while their work is very, very important, they're also not the most efficient organizations. And the fact that you cannot tie their product or service to a price, it means that they cannot generate capital from that activity. And therefore, they're always limited by the capital that they can raise from donors, grants, etc. And so I think that with this concept of impact and profit, you can actually allow these solutions to be sustainable in the long term. So without profit, a company cannot scale. And I'm not saying that you need to maximize this profit.
Yeah.
It's a matter of generating capital, allowing the company to be sustainable, and obviously generating profit so that everyone can take a piece of the cake. But that's the reality. Without money, all these like endeavors wouldn't get anywhere.
So you're saying, we want companies to be much more aware of their environmental or their social impact as well as profit. And that's very nice to say. But ultimately, a lot of company leadership, they're beholden to their investors for profits. And if they try to make that change, they can get fired. There have been a number of oil and gas CEOs who made the push into renewables and ended up getting in trouble. And so it feels like on one side there's like what we would like to see, and the other is like how do we actually make it happen. And so I guess my question is it the government's role to force this to happen, or where does this change really come from?
I think we all play a role in this change. I think governments for sure. Governments, after all, are in charge of regulation. And it's what we were talking about earlier. After all, we like right now companies operate based on what can they do within the law. Like there's no ethics in their decision making. So I think that governments play a very crucial role in building these regulation, building these laws, so that if that's the way companies want to operate, then at least they have to fall within what's permitted within the law. So that's definitely one. From a VC perspective, I think VCs need to change this short-termism mentality. We're all expecting profits straight away. And the thing with impact companies is that results might come a bit slower than purely commercially led businesses. But the venture capital model started in the 1990s, and it was this model based on risk return. So very, very high risk investments could lead very, very high returns, but investors wanted to see these returns ASAP. And I think with impact companies, if investors want to see these results ASAP, it means that you're putting the founder in a position where they need to choose between doing the right thing or complying with investors. So I would argue that if this changed and we're a bit more patient with how and when we're expecting these results to come, that it means that we're giving this space for the company to make the right choices and actually solve the problem that they're here to solve. And finally, I would say consumers. We don't realize it, but every dollar is a vote on everything. It can be the products that we buy. It can be the movies that we watch. Like, after all these values are embedded in our society. And I think we need to be aware that literally a dollar is a vote. So if we want to, like, for example, if as a society we all agreed that, I don't know, Amazon, it's like a profit extracting firm, and like it has like all these negative externalities in the world, and as consumers we decided to stop buying their products, the company goes out of business. So this is just a very like venal example to say that where we put our attention to and where we put our money in like does actually play a role in what companies do and how they do it.
So government, investors, and consumers?
I think so.
That's where the change comes from.
What do you think?
I think governments are the people. And so the people are also ultimately the ones choosing their government. And so to your point, $1 is a vote, but a vote is also a vote. And so if you really want to get out and change the world, I think you need to be involved politically. I imagine that your listening base is quite young. Young people do typically not get out and vote. They're
like 25 to 40. Not that young.
No, but still, if you look at who votes, it's typically people with time, 70-plus-year-olds. And so if there's one ask I would have is for young people to get out and vote, whether that's on a local level, you can influence what your neighborhood looks like, or on a governmental level where you can ask them to be strict on emissions. So yeah, I think that's kind of the one last side of it.
Yeah, I agree. And that also ties to the point of leadership and ethics. I think if we all were to become better leaders and we could implement this idea of making decisions based on what's right, not what we can do based on the law, based on what's right, then we would all be doing different things.
You were quick to throw businesses under the bus and say, they don't care about ethics. They're just profit maximizing. I think it's unfair to generalize like that. There are a lot of companies that would like to do good out there, but to your point, they need to compete with their competitor who doesn't necessarily want to do good. And so I think the answer is ultimately economic, and you need to be able to figure out a way to penalize companies who do bad. And so, what the Europeans are trying to do with that is largely carbon credits. So, if you want to put out emissions because you're a steel maker, you need to acquire a certain number of carbon credits. And so the European regulation is actually quite forward-thinking. And there's a lot of good that's happening there. But then you zoom out and you think at the macro level, and it feels like Europe is falling behind the US, and it's falling behind Asia. And so you ultimately need to ask yourself this decision of like, are you willing to sacrifice what you were saying, which is like short-term growth for what's ultimately better for the environment or for the people? And it's hard to do. It takes a lot of confidence.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of these conversations of like, what is our priority?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that.
Thank you. You're talking about some of the changes you want to see in how people think. If you had a magic wand and you could rewrite, one rule of capitalism, for lack of a better expression, what would you change?
What would I change? I think I would change the fact that right now our only success metric is financial. I think if we added a third level of risk return impact, so a third variable to understand the value of these companies, that would go a long way. And like this example, for example, comes from an investor's perspective, right? So like, how can we understand if a company is valuable? But you can also do it from a like company setup, like company framework perspective, because you can change the incentives of your employees, for example. Like, instead of paying them more money if they achieve XYZ goal or like a financial goal, you can align those incentives based on their outcomes. So I think it's possible. We wouldn't need to change a lot of people's mentalities. But I think realigning incentives would definitely be one of the ways forward.
Okay, let's step away from the kind of theoretical economic side, and let's go a little bit back to what you're building. You started off with a podcast, and that's what you're working on right now. But you're not only doing a podcast. I think you're also trying to connect talent to companies. And so how did that come about? How did you realize that the missing piece was kind of on the recruitment side?
It was, again, very serendipitously. I started posting all this content week on week. We were releasing interviews week on week. And I started getting a lot of very positive feedback about what I was doing. A lot of people just saying that we needed more people spreading the word of this concept, and other people saying that they wanted to find a job in impact. So that's when I realized that people wanted to be more connected with what they were doing, and I naturally connected a few people to the companies that I had interviewed or companies within my network, and they were hired. So that kind of like naturally, that was my way of understanding that there was a need that I was kind of covering, and that made me see that was a potential path that I could pursue in order to grow the community and grow the podcast.
And so it's kind of a new form of recruiting. What are the flaws that you see today in the kind of the conventional recruiting model?
I think that people choose the company that they are going to work for the wrong reasons. I think employers and employers also choose talent for the wrong reason. So I think right now a lot of people choose because of their skill set and the pay. And as an employer, if you have someone that chooses your company because of those reasons, they're mostly going to work for the money. Whereas if the mission was also aligned and they really cared about what the company was doing, that's when you would have talent that would go the extra mile. So I think in general it's the wrong reasons, but I do see how that is changing. The next generation, the Gen Zs, are much, much more aware and self-conscious about how they want to spend their time. Okay.
And so in the big picture, do you feel like recruiting and connecting companies to talent is where you can have the most impact right now?
Right now, yes. Okay. It feels like, look, the impact investment industry, it's a 1.5 trillion industry at the moment. It's been growing 20% year on year. And there's still the misconception that these companies won't give talent the financial security that they're looking for. So in order to solve these big challenge, the biggest challenges of our time, we need the right talent. So I'm making this connection and helping the like impact companies. But then on the other side, we have this new generation that really cares about purpose, who are looking for a job with purpose, in which they don't, so that they don't give up their financial stability. So it feels that there's a match here. And if I have a very engaged audience that is actually looking for a job, it seems that the connection can be very, very, very direct.
Okay, that's great. And so if, say I'm starting a company and I want to kind of tap into your talent pool, How do I do that? How do I work with your recruitment function?
Sure. So if you're a company looking to hire, essentially you need to reach out to me. My email is claudia@reinventingcapitalism.xyz. We're going to have an intro call and we're going to understand what are your needs so that we can create the advertisement based on that. If you are a candidate looking for a job, you should follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram @Reinventing Capitalism. And that's where we post all of our adverts. And if there's an opportunity that someone is interested in, they reach out to my email, same one, and then we will do the first screening. And if they meet the requirements, then we're going to introduce them to the hiring company.
It's a very interesting model.
Thank you.
Let's wrap up by just talking a little bit more about the personal side. Is there someone for whom, if they weren't in your life, you wouldn't be here right now?
So many people. Yeah, I'm very grateful for my family, for my friends. I think at the start when I started this project, everyone was really, like supporting me and helping spread the word, and that meant a lot. I think outside of my inner circle, the girl that I mentioned at the start, I think I should definitely send her this interview because
And some flowers.
Yeah, she has no idea that she was actually the one that told me about this world and told me about my master's. So if I had to pick one in terms of the career transition, I think it would be her.
Okay. We talked a little bit about how your program and this and interviewing has kind of affected your values. But what have you learned throughout this journey, kind of outside from that?
Yeah, I have learned that a small action can lead to big results. There's this saying that goes, be impatient with actions, but patient with results. And I feel that that's really what I'm doing here. Like, I've learned that just by doing something and putting yourself out there, you're already generating opportunities for yourself. And if you get feedback, you can iterate quite fast. And if you're just impatient with this, it means that you're probably going to do it faster than someone else. And then you just need to be consistent. So I'm very, very impatient with actions. Every day it feels like it's a crazy day. I need longer days for sure to really do what I've planned for my days. But I'm not expecting anything. I feel that it will come. I trust that I'm doing the right thing, and so hopefully it comes. But yeah, I just think that something that helps me is knowing that even if I had like a lot of money in my bank account, I would still be doing what I'm doing right now.
Longer days or a bigger team. Are you working by yourself? Tell us a little bit about the support you're getting.
Yeah, so I have my partner Laia. She joined the project just a few months after I launched, and she's been super critical in helping bring together the idea of the podcast, structuring the interviews, the production, the growth, the branding. So definitely a very, very like critical, I wouldn't say hire, but a very critical person in the process. And then like I'm really doubling down on AI. I'm trying to optimize all my processes.
You and everyone.
Me and everyone. But really like trying to optimize all workflows.
Yeah.
And I do think that if it wasn't because of AI, I really couldn't be doing what I'm doing. I would need like 5 people doing
the solo entrepreneur generation.
Yes.
When you can be 12 different employees
literally
by yourself.
Yeah.
How are you using AI?
I am using AI to optimize all marketing workflows. So I have 12 agents working for me right now.
Amazing. Have you named them?
Not yet. I'm not there yet. But essentially they help a lot with research. They help a lot with like structuring the content, building this content, and actually posting this content on social media.
Okay.
So they really take that.
So the whole marketing workflow is largely automated.
Yes. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Maybe one last personal one is, zooming out. What is it that drives you on a day-to-day basis?
What drives me is helping other people. I think it was very hard for me to transition from tech to impact. I was going to use the word scared, but I was
apprehensive.
Yeah, maybe apprehensive of leaving my career behind. And then you realize that I'm not leaving it behind. Like, I'm just changing industries. I guess I just didn't trust that the world of impact could give me career growth and also financial stability. And so if I look back in my own transition, what drives me is helping other people to go through the same transition, because I'm so happy now and connected with what I'm doing that I would really love for other people to feel the same way.
Beautiful. All right. What's next for you and Reinventing Capitalism?
so much. There's so much going on. We're now working with Laia on which are the services that we can offer to these companies, be it companies that we interview or companies within the broader impact space. So I cannot really tell you too much about that right now.
Okay, very secret.
It's not really secretive. It's just like, you know, when you're like, we've basically like wrote down all the options right now, and we don't want to be spread thin. So we need to choose maybe one or two and then focus on that. So hopefully by the end of the summer, we'll have a clearer vision of where we're going and which are the services that we want to go to market with.
Okay, amazing. And if I'm a listener, where can I watch and listen to Reinventing Capitalism?
We are on all major podcast platforms, so you can watch and listen on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And then on LinkedIn and Instagram, we also post snippets of the conversations. I share a lot of personal stories. And now our content has moved towards why a purpose-driven career is good for you. You know, with data, where we've seen on different studies that if you have purpose at work, you are 3 times more engaged. You're more satisfied with your job. It improves cognitive resilience. And so we're trying to really educate talent on these science-backed studies, so that it's not only an emotional decision, and it can also be a rational one.
Okay, amazing.
Thank you, Nick, for accepting my invitation to the podcast.